يقظ وتفرباو Bakaiden pakavna true Yakan duatuf berbau Bakaiden pakavna true Yaqadwatus berbau Pakain dan pakap true. And after I share my comments on Magical Egypt, Series 1 and 2, and Companions 1, 3, and 5, perhaps I will look up what that means, because being mispronounced, it probably is. But the sound is done very well on this series. It's very evocative, and it's packed enough in information that you can really watch it probably a dozen times or so, and it will take that many times or more for a person to absorb all the information that's being said. And certainly the producer, I would, it's worth the buy of whatever he does, as far as I've seen. Not articulating that too well, so I will go on to my comment on a video remembrance of John Anthony West. Symbolic thinking can be used to distinguish meaning and bring out previously unknown function in what survives from far more than ancient Egypt. I remember from somewhere that the Sphinx used to be just a lion 8,000 years ago, according to some oral tradition that is supposed to go back that far. As much as I would even take civilization around the world further back than the 40,000 year ago period that resulted in what can truly be called anatomically modern human, because of our ability to make the variety of vocal sounds that we do. Of course, there's plenty of languages that don't even have 30 vocal sounds. So I would say that the ancient Egyptians, along with the Dogon, I said that wrong, absorbed the retreating Atlantis culture that stretched across North Africa. Such was a period when the ancients would put all the science, art, and philosophy within their mythologies. I think that a return to that would be as close to fixing modern society that we can come. Magical Egypt 1, The Invisible Science. I've listed 2. Oh, Magical Egypt 1, Episode 1, The Invisible Science. Or wait. Okay, yeah, The Invisible Science. It can certainly be said that ancient Egypt is the transmitter of the earlier cultures and can be seen as one of the last major examples of when art, science, religion, and philosophy about all existence were one. But I think the later mystery schools that looked up to them are more along the lines of representative than even distorted remnants. Ancient Egypt was certainly a place where the more standard themes of maintenance, restoration, and development of a spiritual nature see a comprehensive outlook that flows through the psychology of life. Fanaticism is when the temple or teacher is taken as it, but they all are the vehicles of a sort of teaching. The numbers and patterns in matter, plants, and animals will both expose art as unrealistic and guiding art towards a science of life. And there are a lot of interesting examples that come up in the series of that sort of thing. I would say that each land has a public, private, and ethnic side. It can be said that art leads the way to science, or an expression of a sort of science, to say the least. It can certainly be said that virtually every religious tradition before modern times, and most of even recent ones, has had fragmentation and corruption in its transmission, but both discovery and interpretation is certainly a way to maintain what survives and to establish what has been lost. By the forms, it all can develop. John Anthony West was one who carried on the work of Schwaller de Lubitz, was known by his work to me before the first Magical Egypt series, and was part of the reason I bought the first 6 of 8 by sometime in 2005. And, and then of course I bought the other 2 in that series next. The first series solidified the importance of them in my mind and led me to consider acquiring further such films by the producer. Magical Egypt 1, 2, The Older and Still Older Kingdom. Okay. What if the powers and servants, the visage, the symbolic ages of rule that speak to specific truths about what went on after about 36,000 years ago? It is true that science and even philosophy should not be conservative, but direct and influenceable. It is funny how there is clear evidence that the Egyptian civilization goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years before what is generally admitted. Same thing with American, right? As much as things generally degraded by American, I mean on the continents, as much as things generally degraded, I think it could have been more of a lacking in patience and devotion as time went on. Magical Egypt 1, 3, Descent. I do not believe there are overpopulation problems at all, but mismanagement problems. And I've enumerated how at least a few times the population of the world can be fed just from America by a reorganization. If it is a sin or just a reason for guilt or shame, it should not be done at all. We should learn to live a life free of unnecessary fear and hate, too. I would not be surprised in the least to find out that Magical Egypt provoked findings in far more than the field of archaeoastronomy. I would wonder if the consolidation of cultures in ice ages and similar phenomenon would necessitate leaps in technology. What if the yugas are largely just a metaphor of how psycho-spiritual development is not linear, and the time periods are titles convey other information? So you see here that I obviously differ with some of what some of the speakers would have said in this series, as pretty much any series, but I can respond respectively and understand where they're coming from. Magical Egypt 1-4, The Temple in Man. It's certainly not like some ancient alien series where you have to, you can look at it, see that, you're watching it for the information and you're ignoring all their conclusions. And that's really not what I do with the Magical Egypt series. I kind of, even though I disagree in a few points, it's, pretty solid stuff. Magical Egypt 1-4, The Temple in Man. What if Luxor was upon a set of models surviving then, but not existing now? If a temple does not enforce the relationship between humans, other creations, and the divine, it seems deficient. Religious revelation since time immemorial has said to enter the sacred with the right foot and leave towards or enter the toilet area and the rest of the profane with the left. Study of ancient Egypt is enough to make clear that Christianity is the reuse and renaming of older mythology. Seeding the new operation or spiritual side with the remnant of the old is a practice that probably finds its origins in contagious magic of prehistory. Magical Egypt 1.5, Navigating the Afterlife, What to Do in the Duat. At the very least, the Egyptian afterlife scenarios represent the crystallization of the parts of ourselves working together or against each other in development, regression, or in certain circumstances, the connection of spiritual doctrines to psychological states and chemicals in our bodies go far beyond DMT to a variety of over 50 chemicals that can safely produce every drug-like high. I would like to think that most of the blissful parts of my life, I would like to think that of the most blissful parts of my life, death, I would like to think that death will be one of the most blissful parts of my life, except perhaps because of the difficulties of being persecuted. You know, if that's the case, that would cause my death. If we do not look to some such funeral text or a system organized like unto tarot, ancient Egypt shows that we can be active with our consciousness and body towards the end of directing our states and stations towards working in accord with the beings and the universes that they operate in. We are not confined to this body. We are not confined to this bodily life alone, but we can and should live this life for the afterlife. This is what it means to acquire self-mastery, or to become your own Lord and Savior, with the permission of divinity, of course. Magical Egypt, Series 1, Episode 6, Legacy. Memetics is certainly an art that we who operate social media need to learn. The science of spiritual development would have remained important to the elite control if the public had not stepped away from being religious first. Mnemonics of the systems of development might help a person predict the portions that they do not know or forget, but different ways of going at the development of consciousness might have different effects, aside from naming or provincial elements. But that is probably in how magic evokes other parts of our being and what it operates. The goal now would be to return to our spirituality, but is free from statecraft and priestcraft. I keep slipping out of this position, so I'm sorry about any broadcast where I'm sinking down when I'm here. Magical Egypt 1.7, Illumination. Ritual and other spiritual processes can enhance or change the sight or sound of things. Like the kings, we can use archaeoastronomy to map our becoming. Talismans can include books in that Talismans can include books in that the volumes we use can evoke our memories of the material and what it did for us. Charms are as a dismissive physical spell. Amulets are when the items are taken as one of the naturu, or powers in itself. Talismans complete ritual through their growing and evolving meaning and use. So when you reach, so talismans are the only one of those three that are not treated as gods, right? I used to make pentacles according to the seasonal points or the Kabbalistic or planetary sphere themes. My greater pentacle is the religious text of this world and age. It is important to interpret and express history and science through one's spirituality, Thus will every culture have its own potential sacred histories. I do not see matter and spirit as things that need reconciled, but it is clear that we are here to constantly maintain and establish the best relationships with both. Magical Egypt 1.8. Now there's the virtual tour CD, and what was the other one that was part of the series, but there's a lot more things like that nowadays that you have, 3D imagery and you can follow in your computer program, and it's like you're there, and things are better quality of some of that stuff being done now. But I remember Hey Arnold was one of the first things. But anyway, they had this thing on their website, and you can internet was very slow, and there's got to be a better example, or one of these 3D video games or something. But it was a real tours of tombs or something. I don't remember exactly. Magical Egypt 1.8 Cosmology. It is very true that mythology is not just fiction or worship, but a set of teachings relevant to our lives and what we can do with it. The ancient Egyptians and the Dogon of Mali appear to have the same root at Atlantis, which is what I would call the transcontinental culture of much of North Africa of remote antiquity. I think we will find a lot more references of technology and scientific knowledge so advanced that it seems modern in ancient symbols and myths. The mother is the active processing principle and glue of relationships, along with the father as both distant and provider of material, roles, and skills, with the child as the transmitter, transformer, liberator, developer, and even renouncer and destroyer are almost universal metaphors for both the fundamental realities and what we do with it. It becomes apparent in far more than just the Dogon and ancient Egyptian cultures that it seemed that there was some sort of advanced force interacting with them, be that spiritual or extraterrestrial travelers. Now, how necessary the alien thing is, we'll have to wait for evidence, won't we? Or at least experience. Magical Egypt 2.1. Art is the prophet. The artistic nature of the Great Work series certainly sees its continuance through the second Magical Egypt series. The Great Work Network was sort of my favorite social network for a while, and you got the link when you bought the series, but as far as I know, it's gone for good. But I delayed getting Facebook for years because that was such a good social network. It was on key. I got deplatformed from Facebook after maintaining 20 to 30,000 people who were able to follow my material. But anyways, I kept the terms of service, but so don't get too attached to Facebook. Even if you keep their terms of service, they will kick you out sometimes. It can say that the things start out as art or with art, and then decay to dry ideologies and mindless repetition of myth, whether by different psychological or ethnic types, or by different aspects of being. There are times when multiple expressions or beliefs upon the same are right, and others where the differing opinions represent or are trying to reach the same truths. One certainly has to wonder sometimes, beyond conveying scientific information, why some buildings and art were done in particular ways, even in ways that increase difficulty in production. Chemicals our bodies produce or react to are certainly gateways to new perceptions and discoveries. The jokes and extras with this series are certainly more evocative. And Magical Egypt 2, art is the bridge. And of course, these series go beyond the scope of referring to Egypt. It would have been interesting. I don't think anybody's done a series as far as video where it shows that the ancient Egyptians had the 72 tarot cards, really, without being tarot cards, of course, within their art. There was a book in the 1970s. I haven't been able to get a hold of that book in almost 20 years. So, Magical Egypt 2:2, Art is the Bridge. Since magic can be defined as the art and science of religion, it also can be said to be the bridge of our religion. The bridge of religion, that would make sense. Rather than humility and servility, most selective societies will want to see candidates show they will be an asset to membership. Mission creep can be seen as the most dangerous in conservatism, most obvious in reform, and most effective in liberalism. Eastern age art can be seen as devotional or spiritual. Classical age art can be seen as developmental or psychological. Romantic age art can be seen to have degraded to entertainment and distractive. And didactic art can be seen within each, but gets less likely as society allegedly progresses. I think that more than brain anatomy secrets will be found and even more common than shown in this program. But the so-called Venus and Lilith statues in particular are very interesting. If you look at ancient cultures, even a lot of them knew, maybe not the general public, maybe the general public knew, but they knew that the so-called personifications that you're going to see of the divinities, the statues and stuff, that they meant something. If art is considered, if either way of discovery, or as the counterpart of science and magic, that implies not only that it is a functionary of religion, but a deliberate and often unconscious way of willful changes of consciousness. Typically, I do not even record mundane and jumbled dreams, but a huge part of that is I can't seem to be fruitive with it. But H.P. Lovecraft-related dreams would probably get a note. Magical Egypt 2:3, Horus on the Horizon, usually pronounced Hre. Art is the face of what we know and what we do not. Being open and listening doesn't have to mean random obedience to what we become aware of. Negative, positive, and in between is an important set to look at in both cyclical and linear senses, rather than dry judgments of duality that ignore degrees. Hypnagogic consciousness is not the only in-between state of consciousness, but it is certainly a gateway that may be needed to get to the others. Imaginal can be a set of egregores and other thought forms brought about by previous imagination, or could be a psychological ground that spiritual, material, objective, and subjective realities are filtered through. It can definitely be said that spiritual and material link to and source each other, and the previous mention of the God Self icon can definitely be of the religiously conscious person who is firmly planted through his relationships with both. The Teacher is the best short of the series. I see it as demons come and show us interesting tricks, encourage us to do drugs and otherwise party with them. That can produce results that puzzle us all. And, well, okay, let's see if I can think back and give a lighter sense of that one. there are beings out there, and they interact with us, and they bring us, and they give us, and they can affect us, and but they're of another realm, and what goes on in their realm, or they're part of the universe or whatever, you know, is really strange. But so there's a lot of it's not just graphics that you're not hearing, that you're obviously not going to see in this little presentation here. Their scholars mentioned different findings that have been brought up of one sort or another. And so, Magical Egypt, Series 2, Episode 4, The Place in the Middle. When the ball drops, who will have figured out reality, and who will be confused by claims thereof? Studying world mythology tells us just how many symbols are universal and may help us to understand what we never may have found out about their functions without seeing more variety. Atlantis represents a far wider spread of an advanced prehistoric culture than most realize. Difference, unity, and transformation can seem very deliberate or random at first, but tends to be beyond one's mastery and more useful over time. Belief in an evil magician can lend them psychic control over you that was never possible otherwise. Magical Egypt 2.5, Why All the Snakes? And as I'm pointing out in my Easter video, snakes aren't all bad in the Bible, right? Snakes are so popular as symbols because they can virtually be used to represent all opposites, pairs, and communication in between. The surrounding, continuing, and inner outer are my favorite. The Wu Qing of Chinese alchemy, in its external sense of working of external materials, can be seen as the Wei Dan, or external alchemy of the Jing, are life potential, Qi, or life energy, and psycho-spiritual directing called Shen. The riddle can be interpreted as to give up the invasions to who you are and who you should be, but turn the parts and past of how your greater enemies affected you into structures of your ascent. Magical Egypt 2.6, and let me say it's the best of the series, and I don't just mean that because it's a particularly long one. The Temple of Man in the first one, so it's sort of, in a way, an enhancement of that episode in the first series. In Bhakti Yoga, the ignition is self-realization. The supreme alchemy of spirit soul is represented by the Book of Gates. And what is in the Duat? A lot of people talk about the Duat and the Book of Gates, and of course, I'll share and try to correct more of E.A. Wallace Budge's books as the years go on. But water and fire births of the mother and father stages of life can be said to be followed by the air birth of the child and the deaths of earth. It is interesting how not only is there no ultimate separation between science, religion, philosophy, and art, but that virtually no experience or thought is unique when looking into it. It is interesting to find out how temples and sacred diagrams mirror patterns of sacred sounds and pathways of physical functions. It is also interesting how the spinal fluid seems to be the gateway between the body and the mind that is expressed in a tantric way. The difference between Tantra and yoga being the left-hand path and the right-hand path, most people will never figure out the difference between left-hand path and right-hand path. But yoga is the identifying, connecting. Tantra is the weaving. Well, Tantra is the identifying, weaving. Yoga is the connecting side. Same thing. Internal alchemy would contain the secrets to all drug-like highs and states of consciousness. Whether physically or otherwise, we should regard the essential features of maintenance and restoration. Like the light of life, I have experienced the inner light in the dark, and which sees in others. Rather than the retention of fluids in danger, what if it is really moral or spiritual purification of the processes of avoidance? The processes are avoidance of unnecessary stress and general efficiency of energy use. There's always something to awaken and more to do in life. Companion 1, Fracter Ashen Chasen. We can and should alter our consciousness and our ability to alter it to become aware and in a better relationship with the various beings. Angel is so broad of a term, and we should remember that not everything we witness is even on behalf of what we called up. It seems that the forms of the visions of the psychic and spiritual realms are less subjective than possibly directed by how it is known the mystic can be evoked. Traditions and practices may build egregores, but when it comes to what God and even lesser beings want and react to, first-time and unique spiritual practices can be more powerful and more acceptable. Getting in touch with the parts of oneself and how they could be exalted or anointed spiritually will open us to be in accord with light beings and truly surrender to God, who made and directs both spirit and matter. In symbolism, the square and the cube is this: by the breaking the false egos and establishing the connection to the dot, lump, or hole and such. Magical Egypt, 2-3 Companion, Laird Scranton. What was that promo? What is Laird Scranton? Who is Laird Scranton? Something with the dramatic music. I don't remember. There was also the ending to the one episode where you had the doll and being trapped in the doll as an allegory or dream or something. I don't know. What if the Dogon and ancient Egypt were the inheritors of the Atlantean culture, or surviving fragments of it at the least? Both spiritually and psychically, it can be said that humanity would have had the same perennial influences, establishing and maintaining their lives on all levels. I would say that as far back as 30,000 before present ancestors of the culture now called Yazidi not only included Göbekli Tepe and northeast of Egypt, but that it was a chief influencer of Indus, North African, European, and even early American cultures. It would both make sense that there is a material and spiritual creation, and that there are non-empirical dimensions of the physical universe. It would also make sense that there would be some identifiers particular to a particular time, place, and cult. But it seems that there could have been one reoccurring religion. I don't know if it can be said humanity is doomed to go through cycles and ages of ascent and descent, but it certainly seems that such choices are being made. It seems to be more related to the generations of achievement and conversion phenomenon. What seems of utmost clarity is that the same names and forms keep getting retranslated and reworked in other ways. Magical Egypt, Companion 5, Mantakchia. It seems to me that the inner alchemy does not require the transformation of any particular emotion, feeling, or thought, but either the ability to or the ability to direct them is essential to spiritual alchemy. It is also essential to accomplish as much as possible with energy expended and to conserve energy completely. Whether we call it an ascent through the 3 levels to generate more potential and experience or something else, trading can certainly bring a descent through air, fire, water, earth, wood, and metal towards death or disability. And I don't know, let's tie something. Now, to not seem like I'm demonizing a culture, and before I go into the Yakat watu berbau bakai dan tetap not true chant from Stele 666. There's a couple correlations in demonology that I guess maybe I'll bring up here. In terms of the Egyptian parts of the soul, we have Suksum, power, connected to Belial. Akse, effective, useful, is connected to Lucifer Amamon. Azazel is connected to Chitte, body. Brun, name or reputation, is linked to Abaddon. Shoot, shadow, is connected to Lucifuge, Rapakala. K, essence, good, will, life force, astral, is Beelzebub. Bay, soul, personality, is connected to Baal. Yabeh, emotional, mental, intention, is linked to Asmodeus. Sah, dignity, honor, rank, is linked to Satan. And of course, we are a city of 9 gates, and the descending order is, I see the order descending in the gates being 2, 5, 9, 6, 7, 8, 4, 1, 3. So we got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, and go on, connect the lines. It's the circle and cross of Earth and Saturn as the arrow, like the sign of Mars on the sigil of the 9 gates, bringing past the 9 gate. I don't know what else to say about that, but you know, it's an important the Enochian gatekeepers are certainly something that's not the Enochian, the Egyptian gate. Pretty much everything right and wrong about religion has occurred in Egypt, and we can see correlations with pretty much anything. But so we start with the ya. Of course, Natru can be thought of as plural in terms of quality. So we don't have to go quite polytheistic, but it's sort of a oh, me, that, oh, hail. So that's one place we can start with that chant. And the ka. Dua is, of course, prayer. Oh, I'm at the P's, so let me start at the P's and say, You can see how I'm figuring out things in a live format. Yes, a live format. Budge may not have the entry that I'm looking for, even though Budge was around when they discovered Stela 666. That is in the Cairo Museum. Kurt, header. I'm going to guess it means, a kind of fish. No, it's not a kind of fish. It can be related to a turtle. I'm not having a pucker. I'm not having a pucker. So wonder why. I am very suspicious that they're translating that wrong here. Okay, and we got dud. Dud. Did. We're looking something from the might of my breath. I adore you. But we're trying to look at scratch here. So hail, exalted. Okay, yeah, because I want to make sure. See, it's the variation of ka. So to be exalted. Yakatwa. Hail, exalted. One I'm praying to. Something guiding the powers. And we want a tooth in here, don't we? We want a tooth. So tooth. My stomach's telling me, I want you to eat. I'm saying, not right now. Tough. So tough, pour out. But it's not tough I'm looking at, it's tooth. Tooth. Toot, 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 tuck, teb. Turtun, tu, tue, batun, twa. Oh, twa is also a variation of praying or address. Tursha, teher. Okay, I'm just going to have to give up here and admit to myself that we're looking at something about ejecting seed. Father, source, controller. Pretty much to be expected, but obviously we're getting in line with what is present. So let me see if there's any comments before I just let things fade into, okay. Yakadwatus berbaru bagai dan pakap na true. Of course, being greatness. Yakadwatus berbaru bagai dan pakapna true. Yakadwatu verbau bakai dan pakapna true. Yakadwatu verbau bakai dan pakap na true. Yakadwatu verbau bakai dan pakap na true. Obviously, something about the soul is in the middle there. Service, the back. So I guess I'll end this with peace be upon you. Sharma.